Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Conference of Consulting Actuaries Leadership Development Podcast. My name is Michael Clark. I am host of the podcast. I'm joined today by Anthony Lucero. Anthony, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much, Michael. Really appreciate it.
Well, I'm looking forward to our conversation today. We're going to talk a lot about just your background and especially your involvement with the Organization of Latino Actuaries. But I wanted to give people a little bit of your bio as we get started here. So, currently, Senior Associate at WTW based in San Diego. You've worked in the retirement space throughout your career, including on the pension risk transfer side, both on the consulting and the insurer sides of that market. Which I think is really interesting. I'm sure you gained a lot of insight from being on the insurer side as well as on the consulting side. Um, Currently a board member at the Organization of Latino Actuaries and is a past president of the organization, which I'm really excited to talk about as well. All right, couple of other interesting things about Anthony, though. So he's a proud graduate of St. John's University, where he was also involved with Gamma Iota Sigma, which we really haven't talked a lot about on the podcast, and I think that'll be good to talk about in relation to OLA and how those two organizations have some synergies. While you were in school, though, you did a study abroad in Italy.
Correct.
How is your Italian?
It's better than I would expect several years out of that experience. I could still, when I go to Italy, I can still have, very basic conversations, ask for basic things. But yeah, it's definitely, rustier than when I was living there.
Obviously proficient in English, but also proficient in Spanish. Um,
Okay.
um, well, you are right. That's what I was making the
Oh,
comment
sorry.
there. Yeah. That's all right. I wasn't clear with that. That's okay. How close? I mean, Italian and Spanish are fairly closely related there.
Yeah, yeah. No, sorry. I thought you were saying you were Russian Spanish. So that's awesome.
I am actually. I will say that I am. I actually am fluent in Spanish as well.
Okay, no, that's pretty cool. Yeah, I mean, for me, it was, I mean, just having the, growing up in a Mexican American household, having the English and Spanish both being part of my daily life and being able to speak both fluently and reading and writing in both. I think when I went to Rome, right, like you said, Italian and Spanish are have a lot of similarities, a lot of similar roots to the languages. So when it came time to have to pick a lot of it up, just to do basic things. Of course, a lot of people in Italy speak English, and you can get around as an English speaker pretty easily. It does enhance the experience to be able to speak the local language, and so, just a lot of things were, trial and error of, I think this word in Italian is the same as in Spanish, just with an Italian accent. Let me try it out. And sometimes it would work, sometimes it wouldn't. And I think that's where I started picking up a lot of, through trial and error, some classes, of course, some, little Italian English dictionaries, trying to pick up some of that. I was able to kind of make use of it. But yeah, I would say I definitely had the advantage just speaking another Romance language.
That's great. So we were talking a little bit before we hit record on today's discussion that you're also a fairly avid traveler, and you just hit your 31st country that you visited. So tell us a little bit about that. Like, where's the interest in world travel? Where does that come from? And maybe what's the most interesting place that you've been, or most obscure place that you've been?
Oh, that's a good question. I have to say it really started when I studied abroad in Italy. Before that, we as a family growing up would take, trips to visit family across the Southwest US, where I grew up. Um, and, we'd go to Mexico to visit family, but I hadn't really explored much of the US, even less so the world for that matter. So by the time I went to college and I got a scholarship to go to St. John's, and then they offered this unique opportunity to study abroad as an actuarial science major, which a lot of universities don't do that just because the major is so packed with so many courses you have to take, and the progression of math courses throughout your years in college. It was a unique opportunity that I definitely wanted to take advantage of. I'd never been to Europe before, so I think one once I did that the first time and, did all of my travels within Europe during that semester, I quickly found out, this is how I want to spend a lot of my free time, just, seeing different places, places I would read about, see on TV, on YouTube, just different um, platforms, and that's what really excited me. So most of my travels were, contained within Europe up until I was, I think, in my early 20s. Once I had started working full time at Mercer, where I started out, once I graduated. I started venturing out a little bit more and started going to Asia, and then late in my later 20s, then South America. Very limited exposure in Africa, and so I think with all of that, I'd have to say every place has been unique. Every place has had its, brought really fun memories with the experience there. Traveling solo, traveling with friends. Um, I'd have to say the most exciting place I've been to so far has been India, and that I think was just because it's so different, from the U.S., from Mexico, but at the same time, right, it's a country with such high visibility in the world. It's so well known for so many different, cultural, technological aspects. Just, the sphere of influence of that country is so large that it was a place I'd always wanted to go, right? And so I think, like with any other place, there's things that that are similar to what you were expecting, things that you weren't expecting. And yeah, it was just an amazing experience. And I'm actually going back in a couple months with my dad because I think once he saw that I went, he now wanted to go as well. So
How fun. That sounds great. Um, yeah, and so are there um, you mentioned in our earlier conversation you're trying to get to all the continents. What do you have left?
so I have, Antarctica, of course. I think that one's just it's harder to get to. You have to really plan that out. I think you have to do the water crossing across the Drake Passage, I believe. So that, there's a lot of logistics involved in that. And so I think that's one I haven't really, reached yet. I think with Africa, the only country I've been to in Africa is Morocco. So just a very, very small piece of it. And so I think there's a lot of different countries, cultures, landscapes to explore there. But yeah, I think, for a lot of other continents, I've fortunately been able to explore, different pieces of them and just, get a sense of, each continent is so large, right? There's such a large variety of countries and cultures and landscapes within each continent. So just being able to, hit those different parts of them has been really special. And I think it's that variety of travel that I've been looking for as much as the number of countries, right?
Oh yeah, oh, that's awesome. That's interesting. The other things we were talking about before we got started here that you like to play the piano. What kind of music do you like to play?
I had to say when I was younger, just taking piano lessons, a lot of it was, more classical music. But as I, went into high school and then into college, once I went into college, right, it's hard to find a piano just, sitting anywhere and, be able to practice and play. But I think, I loved Adele music when I was in high school, and a lot of it is, very piano based. And so I was picking up a lot of that by ear, just, like with my formal knowledge of piano playing, but then with some of the just picking things up by ear and just, the love for the music. It's, you really do get to appreciate it in a different way, just being able to play it yourself. And so a lot of Broadway music, I started to pick that up as well. And so I'm a big fan of Broadway. And so, I still, to this day, when I play piano with the little keyboard I have in my apartment, just love to pick up new songs. And yeah, I think that, it was one of those things that I said as a young kid, I want to, learn how to play music in some way. And the piano was the one I was drawn to. And I think, since then it's been a great choice just because it is, hard to own a piano when you're moving around so much as I have. But being able to find ways to connect with people through that has been a lot of fun.
That's awesome. And also a karaoke singer. So what's your go-to karaoke song?
I'd have to say it's Since You've Been Gone by Kelly Clarkson.
Okay.
That's one of
I
my
would not have
favorites.
guessed that one.
Yeah, it's such a high energy song. People love to join in. It's one of those songs that, I mean, maybe people like in their late teens or, early 20s maybe don't know it as well, but most other people, right, that just from various generations would know it pretty well. And so it's one of those songs that's just fun to get people to join in with. And it's very high energy and just really, I think, makes a big fun memory for the night.
Well, I think we'll have to go and find an opportunity if you're at the CCA annual meeting one of these years. There's a group of us that are more than happy to go do karaoke with you. So we'll look forward to that.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's funny. I think I guess actuaries really love music because I find that a lot of different actuarial groups I've been in, whether it's conferences or even within OLA, I mean that's always one of our pastimes is just to go enjoy, a night of karaoke or something.
Oh, that's awesome.
So
Well,
I'm
hey,
excited for it.
let's get into some discussion about your career and some of the organizations you've been involved with, specifically OLA. But what led you to be an actuary? Because this is I think is interesting because at St. John's you got a degree in actuarial science, right?
Right.
So you knew what an actuary was at some point during your college experience. So what led you down that path?
So it's interesting because at the time I went to college, we always say the actuarial profession isn't very well known, and I think that's still very true relative to a lot of other, professions that are more common. But I would say it was even lesser well known at the time. And so I really found out about the profession when I was in high school doing, I think it was a career aptitude test or something like that, where you put in your interest, your different skills, what you really excel in school. And so, based on all those answers, it will give you a list of careers that are, that were a really good fit for you, or at least to start looking into, right? As you look into colleges and what majors you want to pursue and that sort of thing. And the actuarial profession came up on that list. And, the other ones I was pretty familiar with, of course, it will say something like, accountant or, something in business, auditor, engineer, things that are very math heavy, right? And, or business heavy. And I didn't know what an actuary was. So I started looking into it and I stumbled onto a scholarship for a 1 week, um, you know, I would say like almost like a summer camp sort of thing for high school students that were interested in the actual profession, that Illinois State University was hosting at their campus in Normal, Illinois, and they basically paid for my travel expenses and lodging at the residence hall on campus to stay for the week, meet other college students from around the country or high school students from around the country that were interested in the profession. And they took us to different companies in the area, gave us a little seminar on what an actuarial exam is like, and just all these different things that really gave you great insight into what the profession was. And I think it was after that experience that I was pretty much sold on it. And I said, I want to be an actuary. And so going into my senior year, after that summer, it was a question of, okay, which university do I want to go to? And, I think I wanted to stay in Southern California at first, but the more I started looking into different universities, St. John's University came up as one in New York City, and I had never been to New York City before, so I applied. They gave me a really nice scholarship, and it was all just kind of history from there. I decided to enroll, and that's really what I think set me up for where I am today in the profession.
That's interesting because one of the things we'll talk about with the Organization of Latino Actuaries is one of the primary reasons why OLA exists is to get Latinos introduced to the profession,
Mhm.
and it sounds like you came into it on your own, which was a little bit unusual.
Yeah, and I will say, I guess, yeah, when we get to more of that, I'll go into more detail with that. But that is one of the, I think one of the reasons I'm so passionate about the cause, and just why, it's like why I, some people that are on the board with me at the leadership team see the importance of getting more awareness of the profession, especially in the Latino community. Some people, because they didn't know about it and found out about it later in their career, they were either career changers or as seniors in college, how to kind of make a last minute switch to the major or to the career path. And then others like myself, right? We know how rare it is to find it so early on, especially in the Latino community, where it's just not a well known profession. So yeah, it definitely, I would say that experience in itself was something that really shaped, kind of where I am today and what I'm passionate about with that.
No, that's excellent. Well, let's talk a little bit more about your career, and then we'll circle back to Ola. So talk to everybody for a few minutes here about your career progressions. You've had a number of different roles within various companies. You've been on the consulting side, the insurance side. I'd love for your perspective on just what those different opportunities and experiences have been like for you.
Yeah, I started, so when I was at St. John's, I did a couple of different internships, both on the PNC side and the life health retirement side. And I think, I still, after those internships, I still wasn't entirely sure where I wanted to go. So when Mercer came on campus to recruit for their retirement consulting side, I was really interested. I applied. I really liked the team and what they were doing, when I interviewed. So, that's where I decided to go. And I was there for a good 3.5 years, I think, for the first part of my career in New York City. Once the pandemic hit, I, decided to go, remote and come live back in California for a little bit. And it was during that time that, I found an opportunity at what is now Corbridge Financial. Back then, they were AIG Life and Retirement. And, with the PRT business, growing so much at that time, and I think, just being in your, early mid 20s, you're also just, excited to try new things and see different things. I applied for the role there, and once I got it, I joined the pension risk transfer pricing team at Corebridge, and it was such a great experience to get to learn more about, how the insurance side of the industry sees pension plans, the risks that come with them, how they're looking at transactions. It's the same concept on both the consulting and insurance side, but the way that they approach it, the way that their leadership, who's taking a much wider view on their business, sees the impact of those transactions and the movement of retirement income in that direction. I think was really interesting for me, and I learned a lot of different things. Just the way that they measure profitability, and on from a reserving perspective and a rate of return perspective, the way that they source assets for those transactions. It's a type of thing that you just don't really see if you're on the consulting side. Um, and it was while I was at Corebridge, during that period that I then wanted to, I saw other teams within the insurance business doing a lot of different work on their predictive analytics and experience studies, especially with in relation to mortality and mortality improvement, which, as we know, since the COVID-19 pandemic, has been really difficult to kind of put into one specific place, just because the impacts of that on population mortality are still emerging as we go along. And so that's when I found an opportunity at Prudential to go into their experience studies and mortality assumption setting, within their life insurance business. So I did that for a little while. I learned, one of the things I wanted to do was learn how to code in Python and SQL, and do more database work, and just, because I was always interested in the data science side of our profession as well. So that's kind of where I took that. And then finally, through all, I met a lot of great people at WTW, who, just seeing how the company supported them in their volunteer work at Ola, seeing the fact that they were a founding and current platinum sponsor of Ola, really spoke to me as a professional kind of looking for that next opportunity. And so when the time came to make a move, they were recruiting for their retirement business here in Southern California, and that's where I had grown up and where most of my family is. That was kind of for me the right time to make a move over there. So since then, I've been at WTW for about a little over a year and a half now, coming up on 2 years in June, and it's been it's been an adaptation, right? Coming back out of insurance, back into consulting. You know the I think the pace at which you move is different, but I think especially just not having done like standard pension consulting work for a while was a bit of a challenge. But the team I've had here has been amazing at just being so supportive, and both me at the company, but me as an Ola leader as well. And it's been a really, I would say it wouldn't have been as easy as a transition back into pension consulting in any other company as it has been at WTW. So really happy to be back in the space. So much interesting stuff going on in the pension consulting space, as I'm sure you're all aware. And it's been a really great experience to get to help clients with all those different issues they're facing.
No, that's great. I appreciate that overview. Have you found the skills that you learned and the information that you took in working at Corbridge and Prudential? Have you been able to apply those skills and that knowledge into what you're doing now that you're back into that traditional retirement plan consulting position?
Yeah, actually, one of the best things I learned out of that experience of, not just being on both the consulting and insurance side, but then being, within two insurers, within now two consulting firms, is you realize that despite the fact that companies do things in different ways, and even direct competitors, right, like WTW and Mercer or Prudential and
Mhm.
Corbridge, right, even though they'll do things in different ways, you see a lot of similarities, and it helps you just kind of get a better sense of what is an actuary there for, right? At a high level, and what are some of those common skills that you can pull across the board? And I think, one of the things I learned is just, how to identify your stakeholders, effectively, right? And I think when you're in insurance, a lot of them are internal stakeholders with your leadership. So understanding their background, where they're coming from, there's a lot of overlap there with your clients, right? Like understanding their background, where they're coming from, knowing how to take what they're interested in, and being able to speak to that in a way that kind of meets them in the middle with what they're coming with. And so I think a lot of that piece of it, just working with different stakeholders, was a big skill set that I was able to take back. The different things we did with database management, and coding, and kind of process optimization. It's not something that you're often able to scale in consulting in a way, just because each client comes with their data in a different format, or they come with their different challenges, their different questions will come in different formats, so sometimes it's hard to standardize that. But what learning all that coding efficiencies, and just being able to kind of learn how to simplify things in a way has really helped me now at WTW, as we're looking at how do we learn how to be more efficient, and reduce costs on things we don't need to be spending as much time on. And yeah, it's been really useful having that additional skill set to be able to say, oh yeah, I can help with that because I've done this or that. And just getting ideas from all these different companies and people you work with.
I think that's really interesting. I think that's important for people to know and understand, right? That no matter how you progress through your career, there's those opportunities to learn different skills and then find ways to apply them to whatever you're currently doing. So I find that to be very helpful and instructive. I'm sure a lot of people will appreciate that as well.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
so talk to us a little bit about how you first got involved with the Organization of Latino Actuaries, or OLA. I see you're sporting your OLA shirt today too,
Oh, yep.
uh, which is great. How did you first get involved with this organization?
Yeah, I first started as a volunteer mock interviewer and resume reviewer for the college and university students and career changers that were looking to enter the profession. And it was still very early on when OLA was starting, because I graduated school in 2017, and that was the year OLA was founded. So those first 2 or 3 years, I was especially working at Mercer in New York, and everything's in person. It's like you're so busy with your own personal and professional life that you're kind of like seeing things on LinkedIn, kind of seeing what's out there, what's going on. But I wasn't really aware of the organization until about 2 or 3 years later, 2019, 2020 or so, when I started seeing more, content on LinkedIn and social media about, oh, there's this organization for Latino actuaries. Is this a new thing? Is this something that's been around? I just didn't know about it. What are they focused on? What are they doing? And so I think just, through my own curiosity, started looking more at what they were doing. And a call for volunteers came up. And funny enough, it's still the way we get people involved, right, is just through calls for volunteers, whether it's to be a mentor for current students, or a resume reviewer, mock interviewer, scholarship application reviewer. It was through that I got involved. And then when board applications came out, at the time, that was really the only leadership opportunity in the organization, since we didn't have our full leadership team yet like we do now, is having senior program managers, committee members, all that stuff. So I applied for the role, and I didn't get it the first year. And funny enough, the person that did end up getting it was someone I ended up being really close with later on, and learned a lot from. And so kind of things always work out the way they're supposed to, right? And but I did end up getting a different board position the following year when I reapplied. And yeah, it was such a big learning opportunity, seeing how a nonprofit at a national level is being run, especially when you're working with a lot of the original co-founders, that, you know, a lot of them were still on the board at the time. That's always, you know, something I'll look back at as one of the big privileges of coming in as early as I did, was getting to work with those great minds that put all of this together, and you know, brought this amazing organization together. And since then, it's just been a journey of trying to figure out, okay, what are we doing? How are we going to do it? You know, we're growing really quickly. How do we scale to that? And yeah, it's just been amazing to see the growth of the organization in just the, I don't know, 5 years or so that I've been. This is my fifth year now, I think, on the board, and just, you know, seeing that growth over that, you know, 4 year period in the past has been amazing.
No, and you're right. That's an incredible way that you got in when you did. Well, actually, this was several years ago now, that we had Alejandro Ortega as a guest on the podcast. Alejandro being one of the founders of Ola, and yeah, it's been. I'm actually, the other person that I'm connected with closely is Adelaida Campos, who's
Hmm.
also one of those founders of Ola, and Adelaida and I overlapped. I was an intern at what was Tower's parent at the time when she started as a brand new entry level analyst.
Oh
So
wow, I didn't know that. Yeah.
got to briefly know her down in Los Angeles for a little bit. And so it's been fun to interact with her and her role at Ola in the past, and it's the way our paths have crossed over these last few years. So lots of good people there, and I wholeheartedly agree with you. Those are some great people to learn from. That founding group, is they're pretty impressive in terms of what they pulled together. Well, let's talk a little bit more about Ola. And for those that maybe aren't familiar with the organization, give us some background on how the organization came to be and what it's trying to accomplish.
Yeah, so the like I said, they started it in 2017 as a nonprofit, and it was really to kind of help bridge a lot of gaps that we saw in the profession as a whole. And we, you know, I think we as a community, right, but especially the co-founders that were there at the time and were trying to build the organization from scratch, really. You know, just all the legal and logistics of, you know, building a nonprofit and having to run it and do the legal filings and everything, that, you know, get that all established right, and running finances, you know, when they first started getting their first corporate sponsors. And you know, so there's a lot of that work, and then there's the programming side, right, of, okay, now you have this all built, what do you do with it, right? And even before the nonprofit was, you know, formally started, right, there was already outreach efforts, and you know, people like Alejandro, right, and Adelaida, as we know her affectionately as Lala, and in the organization, you know, they were just doing a lot of outreach to people in the, you know, profession, early career professionals, you know, college students that they would find at, you know, career fairs and stuff like that, just trying to figure out, you know, where are the Latinos, right? You know, where's our community, and how are we going to meet them, and get, you know, make them aware of these opportunities that exist in this profession. And it was a lot of grassroots efforts, and it's something that I tell the team all the time, even now, especially as, you know, being president last year and past president this year. You know, we have a lot to remember about that experience, and kind of where we came from, and why it's so important to continue to do that, because for as much as we've grown, there's still a lot of, you know, grassroots efforts that are needed to reach out to people one on one, get to know them individually, you know, figure out where they're at, you know, what are they concerned about, what are their challenges that they're facing. And I think it was, you know, through a lot of those efforts that the co-founders and then those newer board members coming in, like myself, and then now we're at now with the full team of, you know, I think almost 40 people of, you know, Ola leaders across the organization, in various different roles. Yeah, it's amazing. You know, everyone does a different thing and works on a different program, and it was just building that stuff over time that really got us to where we are today. And I would say a lot of the programming was focused more virtually at first. You know, one, because the organization was still small, there wasn't enough funding to do a lot of travel. But I think also at the time, when you think about it in a timeline, right? 2017 is not that far from 2020, and that's when a lot of stuff shut down. A lot of in-person travel was, shut down, whether you had the money to travel or not, right? It was you had no other choice but to look virtually at how to program and get people together. So I think when I joined the board, that's when it was in 2022, and that's when things started opening up, um, and a lot of conferences were starting to relaunch their in-person annual events. And it was at that point that, we started looking at, okay, how can we maximize these in-person engagements to really connect people, not just, college students and career changers that are trying to get into the profession, but also early career professionals that maybe went through OLA's programs virtually, but had never met anyone in OLA in person. And maybe were kind of the sole Latino at their company or their actual department, kind of trying to figure out, what are the unspoken rules of corporate world, or what are the what areas of mentorship am I missing to be able to move up in my career? And I think that's when the organization slowly started taking a pivot from just helping get the representation, helping bridge that representation gap of the Latino community in the profession, and focusing more on now, okay, we still need to work on that piece of it, of helping raise awareness of the profession, increasing the representation of Latinos in the profession, but now also, once our first couple students start entering the workforce, how do we support them in moving up, and not just keeping their jobs, but thriving in their jobs? And I think that's where a lot of OLA's programming has moved to today. So it's a lot more encompassing of the full pipeline of Latin actual professionals, from early career all the way to experience level.
Is there any kind of stated goals or objectives as far as where you want to see the proportion of Latino actuaries get to within the profession, at least here in the US?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. It's something that we as a board always talk about. Do we have a defined target, a defined goal? And it's hard to do that when you're working with so many different factors at play. And I think especially right now with kind of some of the resistance at a federal level toward DEI initiatives, and with other companies, right? With that resistance, right? They're kind of trying to figure out, where do we land on that spectrum of, we want to support these initiatives. We know there's a need for talent at different levels, and knowing that even the demographics of the US population are changing, just by virtue of that changing, you are going to end up needing to look in different places of society to figure out, where are you going to recruit people to enter the profession. So, it's hard to put a number on that, but what we've always identified is at least kind of a baseline of, what does this look like elsewhere? Is we always tell our new OLA leaders when they start, kind of like in an OLA 101 session, right? And with corporate sponsors looking to sponsor OLA for the first time, one of the things we always tell them is, about 20% of the US population identifies as Latino. About 10% of STEM, workers and employees identify as Latino, and only 2 to 3% of actuaries identify as Latino, right? So you just look at the gap there, as you start moving into the more granular segments of, kind of where we sit in relation to other professions. That's where we see, maybe we don't know what the number is, but we know it has to at least be higher than what it is now.
No, we talked about this a little bit at the beginning too. Part of this is just exposure, right?
Hmm.
Just and I know that's one of the things that I've always appreciated about Ola's approach is that it's not like there's opportunity for Latinos to get into the actuarial profession. It's just helping them understand that that's an option and what it is. Like
Hmm.
you said, you kind of came into it on your own, but most people, it's not like they've got an uncle or a cousin or a neighbor that says, "Oh,
Hmm.
you should look into being an actuary. You're good at math. You like these type of problems," and so it's overcoming those
Hmm.
barriers that just naturally exist because it's a segment of the culture that's just not exposed to what an actuary is.
Right. And what's been really cool about that is, through that process of trying to raise that awareness, it just kind of always reminds you, right? This isn't a Latino specific issue, right? I mean, the profession as a whole
Mhm.
is really struggling with that of how do we raise awareness of what we do, not just for aspiring actuaries, but just the general public, right? And making sure that they know what we do because it matters in how we approach new business. It matters in how we help other departments work with us, in our own companies. And, furthermore, that wider awareness, right? It's like then you start seeing people like, oh, my consultant is an actuary, or, the person that priced our insurance is an actuary. Maybe that's something you should look into as a future career. So yeah, it's been a really interesting, finding of just going through all of that, that despite the gap being so high in representation for the Latino community and for other underrepresented communities in the profession, I think it's something that we find is just a really good opportunity to work with so many different stakeholders in our profession to really raise that awareness across the board.
So awareness being one issue, are there other difficulties that actuaries with a Latino background experience that maybe others don't?
I would say, and it's funny, we get that question a lot, and sometimes you think about it, and you're like, well, there are things that the Latino community is going to experience as a challenge of being in the profession, but you find a lot of those challenges do exist in different areas. Whether it's if you're coming from another Latin American country to work in the U.S., for example, and you went to school there, you grew up there, maybe English is a second language for you. That can always be a barrier, and that can be a barrier for anyone coming to work here from any country, right? That doesn't have English as a first language. There's the aspect of maybe not having the right mentors in place to help you navigate the corporate workplace, not having like parents or like you said aunts, uncles, neighbors that kind of know how things work, and how to really advocate for yourself as a professional. And that's something that again that we see it within the Latino community, but that's something that could really be applicable to a lot of different communities that are underrepresented in the profession. And I think it's finding that those intersectionalities where a lot of the challenges manifest themselves within that has helped us work with other affinity groups on identifying those challenges, and just being able to say we know that this is an issue. How are we going to support our professionals in moving up and advocating for themselves, overcoming maybe some doubts about their abilities, or kind of their capabilities as a professional, and being able to do that in a way that really makes people feel empowered to move forward.
Interesting. I love that. That's great. As far as like what you're trying to accomplish there in those obstacles or those challenges. So talk to us a little bit about what some of the programs and events that OLA runs are. I think you've alluded to some of these, but I think it'd be interesting for us to hear a little bit more detail.
Yeah, I think one of the big things that we're focused on right now is well, one of the biggest things that we've had kind of emerge over the past 2 or 3 years is our Ola Avanza conference. And I'm sure, even if you don't know what the conference is, you're probably starting to see a lot of it on LinkedIn, Instagram and TikTok and all these other platforms, newsletters, because it is something that is becoming much more of a focus for us as an organization. Not just because I think that in-person aspect of having people together and having the community together is great. I mean, that's a great bonus of it, but I think the real focus of that is just bringing the right people together in the right space. And what I mean by that is, for a college or university student, right, even if they do all the work virtually to, get their resume reviewed, get their mock interview, get a mentor throughout the, semester in college, when they do that virtual interview, right, are they really prepared to make that impression, and get that role? Are they aware of how to network with people in person? And that's a skill that has been harder to come by, especially in a more virtual world, and especially for college university students that did school very differently than the way we might have done it right in person. That's become something we have identified as a major challenge for our talent pipeline, and so that's been one area of focus. But the other area of focus in kind of doing this large in-person event is also having programming for our professionals, right? And so, our OLA leadership team gets these interactions a little bit more naturally just through our annual meetings and in-person summits that we do as an organization. But a lot of professionals, like I said, maybe they're they're working at a small company and they're the sole actuary in their company, or they might be at a big company, but they might be the only Latino actuary in the company. So they might have found it hard to kind of relate culturally, or through some other aspect, where it's kind of hard to find a natural mentor, a natural colleague that's going to kind of where you both can advocate for each other in the workplace and help learn from each other. And so what we're trying to do now with these programs is, with this conference, is do professional education sessions. So CE, CPD credits that are offered, so you can have that in person, collaborative environment to learn and discuss with other actuaries, but also have the informal networking aspects, right? Whether it's having a game of soccer in the off hours of the conference with other actuaries, or like we talked about, having a karaoke night, and the mixers that we have, and all these other networking opportunities that are more informal, and they exist just to bring people together and empower our professional community to feel hey, you're not alone in this profession. There are a lot of other people that have a similar background as you, and have similar challenges, and these are the people that are really going to help you find your place and move up in the profession. So that, I have to say, is the biggest one. And of course, other things we've continued to work on that we've built on over the years is our scholarship program, our exam support programs, and just helping find, using different marketing tactics, and we've even try to get different email lists and that sort of thing, to try to reach the main influencers in the lives of high schoolers, whether that's counselors, parents, teachers that can help inform students about what the actual profession is, what financial assistance is out there, so you don't have to go at this alone. And you want to take an exam, right, and you want to just try it out. Well, there's help for that, right? You don't have to just cough up $400 and say, oh, I hope I pass, right? It's we're really trying to get people to be more willing to try, take that risk, and say, this might be for me, let me try it. And so that's something that Ola, in light of doing all these other programs, to go more in person, do more of these networking opportunities, we're still also focused on kind of what brought us together in the first place, and just bringing that new pipeline of talent into the profession.
I love that. And having, I have actually volunteered with Ola before in the resume reviewing group and the mock interviews, and it is a lot of fun to be able to help these students like think through some of those items that are table stakes for getting a job within the profession. The
Mhm.
other thing I think is interesting, that where I've seen Ola's programs at work, there's usually, the last several years, we've had a contingent of Ola students attending the CCA annual meeting, and they come with one or two of the mentors, but there's usually a group of 4 or 5 of them, usually from local universities or universities that are close by, and they get to attend sessions, they get to ask questions, and that has been so much fun to interact with them. You can just see they've got
Mhm.
a passion for what they're, or an excitement at least, for the possibility of becoming an actuary, and it's been really fun interacting with those students through that program as well.
Yeah, and the CCA has been really, really generous, just financially, right, with supporting Ola and helping us, fund the programs that, otherwise, where do you find the funding to do it, right? But also, with inviting us to that event every year, and I got to go this past year in Vegas, and it was, for me, it was, as a current professional in the consulting space, I found it really valuable for my own career, just to meet, well, not just see prior colleagues from, like, when I was at Mercer, for example, or even at Corbridge, and see colleagues that I worked with in the past, and get to reconnect with them, and kind of talk about just what are you doing in general, right, with your career, where do you see things moving, but getting to sit in on those sessions, getting to meet current colleagues at WTW. We're such a big company too, that a lot
Mm-hmm.
of us are spread out throughout the country, and so sometimes you don't meet people in person until you have an occasion like this to connect. So it's stuff like that that I think we've seen be really helpful to our students. And I have to give a shout out to Lala Campos. She's been been so instrumental in really advocating for that CCA OLA partnership. And and especially I think she's talked about working with you as well, and just really advocating for that, because I think one challenge we see with students too, right, is sometimes they're scared of consulting because they say, oh, it's really challenging, it's really it's a lot of work and it's a lot of hours, and it's like, yeah, it is a different environment, but there's so much opportunity there. There's so much you can learn. There's really exciting things to work on. And
Yeah.
I think when they see us in our environment there at the conference, they see how much we love our work and how much we really enjoy what we do. And I think that is a great way for them to connect. Hey, maybe I should look into this too, and or this company looks really cool, or that person I met, is doing really interesting work. And I think it's something that's been kind of one of those something that maybe started as a way to just help our students grow professionally, and has also turned into a way to say, hey, here's other career options for you as well within the actual profession that you just may have not known about, or maybe had some myths debunked for you on what this is.
Yeah. No, I love that. I think that's great. Any success stories that you can share with us?
Yeah, I'd have to say, I mean, we're so proud as an organization of just what we've been able to do. With there's been challenges like the COVID-19 pandemic, right? Like I said, there's been the political pushback on DEI initiatives. There's been economic volatility that we've gone through as an organization as well. And just throughout all of that, we have such a great team that pushes through and says, we really care about what we're doing here. And keeping in mind, right, we don't actually have any full-time staff. We just recently started getting, part-time contractors that are helping us do little things here and there, but we're generally still very volunteer run. And so, all of the funding that we get goes directly to our programs. And it's very much just I think the will of the people that keeps this organization going, and the passion that people have for it. They see that the direct impacts that it has. And I think one of the most recent success stories that I can share from that is just when we put together this conference last year, right? It was we got such great feedback on what it offered to people, and not just from the community that was there, but from sponsors too, right? And other organizations that had contingents there, like the SOA, or the Academy of Actuaries, just having that presence there of the industry, and having them see, this is how much OLA has grown. And when people realize, oh, this was a volunteer run event, that's amazing. You just wouldn't expect that. And so I think that, I mean, that in itself, among many other things, right? We have scholarship applications that continue to grow exponentially, and just shows how much we're reaching people that didn't know about this before. Or our case competition that has reached high school students that again wouldn't have known about the profession, and that this is a math career they can look into. There's just so much that I couldn't even really choose one, but I have to say that conference was probably the most notable one to us, just because we were all there in person to see that together.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. And obviously, I mean, so much with the organization has grown over the last almost 10 years now,
Mhm.
since its founding, and just the number of lives that you're able to affect, and the type of programs that you're able to run is just, it's impressive. And I really congratulate all of you and the rest of the OLA leadership and what you've been able to do. It really is impressive.
Oh yeah, we really appreciate it.
So let's talk for just a couple minutes here as we wrap up about leadership. And I really want to get your view on the importance of diversity in leadership. It's a topic that comes up when we're talking to people with some of these actuarial affinity groups, that I think it's really instructive for people to hear. What are the benefits? What are the difficulties? Talk to us a little bit about your thoughts on diversity in leadership.
Yeah, I think what I've really learned about that is, you always hear, right, diversity is good for any organization. It helps, open up new perspectives. And I think all that is still very valid, and it's very, useful to remind people that this is why that diversity is important, and why, you want to make sure you have a good team put together from a variety of backgrounds. What I've learned through both being on the OLA board, as well as being in forums with other leaders in the industry, or even within my own companies that I've worked at, is that it's so easy as an actuary to work in an echo chamber where you all think the same way, or you're all, experiencing the same challenge. So you must think, okay, this is our main priority, right? And sometimes it's easy to miss, oh, we're not even thinking about this issue, or, maybe there's this other way to approach this. And, some of it comes from having, a variety of technical backgrounds on your team, whether that's in technology or practice, area work that you've had, and, that sort of thing. But it also comes from just lived experience, right? Where you say, oh, I had this situation in my personal life that kind of informs the way I think about this. And, and that can come, like I said, again, from having generational diversity, having gender diversity on your team, having racial and ethnic diversity on your team. There's a lot of different reasons why people will bring something different to the table. And I think, especially in a profession like ours, where, we are, for the greater good, we are a very standardized profession, that we have very specific standards we have to work by, code of conduct, ways things need to be done, to make sure they're consistent, that they're accurate. But because of that, sometimes we don't think outside the box in the way that we should to approach different business issues. And I think having that diversity is even more important for our profession, to make sure that we're really meeting those challenges as they come up. And especially with, the rise of AI, as a tool for businesses to work with, how are we tapping into that, with different risks emerging, with our population that we serve changing in the US, like I alluded to earlier. Everything that changes requires a new way of thinking to approach it.
Yeah, no, I love that. What specifically have you learned from your leadership experience within Ola?
I think it kind of aligns with that point of, you have to really balance, holding to your own, beliefs on things, or your own values, and making sure that if you are passionate about something, you need to advocate for that, you need to speak up for that. I think when I first joined the Ola board, I was so young. When I look back to it, I joined when I was in my mid-20s, right? So I think it was, working with all of these really other, experienced actuaries, co-founders, that have already had executive experience in their company. I was very shy at first about, just putting my own thoughts forward and being able to speak up. And it was actually, Lala Campos, who, has become a really good friend and mentor over the years. Just, she told me, we brought you onto this board to be a voice for that, to have your own say, have your own vote. And just having other mentors and people like that, that have shared that perspective with me, it's really taught me, you're there for a reason, right? If you don't do it, who else will speak up? Who else will, advocate for that? And then on the flip side of that, I think it's also been a practice of, you're working with so many people who have very different levels of experience, different backgrounds. They've worked on different boards. I know we talked about Gamma Iota Sigma. That was an organization I was heavily involved with, and I think that really prepared me for this leadership opportunity within Ola. Because it was, again, a very similar engagement, at least at the college university level, of, how do we engage people in different universities, different, career for opportunities, stuff like that. And just, kind of learning through that experience of, while you have to, you have to advocate for yourself and your values, and kind of what you really believe will help the organization move forward. You also have to be open-minded to what's around you, and, the other points that people will bring, and other ways of doing things. And just because something worked this way in the past doesn't mean it's always going to work this way, or that it's always going to be the right path forward. And so I think that's been kind of the flip side of that, is just being able to balance those two things out, and, be a good leader, and listening to your team, knowing when you have to say, okay, there's a lot of ideas here. Let's focus on this one thing and move forward with that. And then knowing when to say, I need your help. I need those ideas. I need those perspectives, because I alone can't do that. And so I think yeah, it's a learning experience. I think it's still something it's an everyday learning experience for me, even now. And, as I approach, more senior positions in my own career at my company, I think it's something that's just, something you never stop learning how to do better. And I think that's been, one of the best learning experiences of having this opportunity.
Oh, that's great. I appreciate your perspective on all of that too. I think that's uh, yeah. There's so many good things to take from that. Um, as we wrap up here, I'll ask you one other question on leadership. How can somebody from a majority ethnicity be an ally to people from more diverse backgrounds and helping them be successful within their careers?
Yeah, I that's it's always such a fun question we get because I think sometimes people are intimidated by the concept of being an ally, right? It's like,
Mhm.
sometimes, I think sometimes we're made to feel like, oh, you have to have a certain skill set or knowledge of the community that you're going to be an ally to in order to be a good ally, and that's just not the case. I think it's more just about being open and curious than anything else, and being respectful to people's perspectives, right? It's like knowing that you're not going to know everything about who you're trying to help, and just being open to those different things you're going to learn in the process. And I think a lot of it is just coming from a good place, wanting to help, being good at listening, not just saying I'm going to come in and I know how I want to help. It's like, there's things you can learn from that too, and say maybe there's a way you can help that you don't even know about yet, right? And so I think we tell this to volunteers all the time, and even a lot of members of our leadership team are allies now, that have started to come in and help. You don't have to be Latino to join OLA, and you don't have to be Latino to make an impact here. I think our overall goal is to help increase that representation and influence of the Latino community in the profession, but there's a lot of allyship involved, whether it's advocating for your company to send people to the conference, to the career fair, or sponsor OLA financially, right? Because we need those funds to make our programs happen. It could also just be talking to your next door neighbor. If they're Latino, and you know that their high school student is really good at math, maybe talk to them about this profession if you know someone. It's a lot of the little things that I think really go a long way, and in aggregate have really helped us make that impact that we have.
No, I love that. That's so great. And Anthony, I really appreciate your time today. I think this has been really insightful. I know people will take a lot of good stuff away about your from your experience, let alone what you're all doing over at the Organization of Latino Actuaries. If people want to get connected with the Organization of Latino Actuaries and help, whether that's through a sponsorship, through volunteer, what's the best way for them to do that?
I'd say probably two different places to go for that. The main website is latinoactuaries.org. So if you're interested in volunteering, go to latinoactuaries.org/volunteer. And we're, still building that page to make sure that we have the latest opportunities up there for people to help. If you're looking to sponsor OLA as a company, or just even learn more about what the organization does and how your company can get involved, what that right sponsorship level is for you, or if you're another nonprofit organization looking to get involved, you can just email corp engagement at latinoactuaries.org. So it's CORP ENGAGEMENT at latinoactuaries.org. I know because it's not fully corporate engagement, it's corp engagement at latinoactuaries.org. And we have a great team that is just great at reaching out, getting information based on where, what type of organization you are. And it's, I think what the message really there is that there's ways to get involved both on the individual level and the organizational level.
And what I think is nice too is that there are, and I can say this from experience, right? Even a little bit goes a long way, even from a time perspective, right? Whether it's reviewing a resume, doing a mock interview with someone, giving them that feedback just to help prepare them, and there's lots of opportunities that I found through OLA to be able to give back and contribute.
Exactly, and we always really appreciate the help. So, I mean, thank you especially, and thanks to everyone that's listening and has volunteered in the past, because we really wouldn't be where we are without that.
Well, I want to thank my guest today, Anthony Lucero. We talked about Anthony, if people how they can get connected to OLA. What if they want to follow you and connect with you and see what you're up to? What's the best way for them to do that?
I have to say I've become pretty active on LinkedIn over the years, just by nature of this, all the work that we do in OLA and trying to make sure people know what's going on. So you can always follow me on LinkedIn. And that's probably the best way to connect with me. Our bios on latinoactuaries.org, for the board members, have our emails as well if you'd like to reach out and connect. There's lots of different ways to get involved, but I'd say, yeah, at least in my current OLA role, my most active presence is probably on LinkedIn.
All right, sounds great. Well, I want to encourage everyone to subscribe and like this podcast to help us share stories and experiences like Anthony's and those of the Organization of Latino Actuaries that can help benefit the entire actuarial community. The leadership development community of the CCA is open to any actuary. You can reach out to the CCA to join. And I want to thank Shannon Peterson of CCA staff for helping to produce today's event. Join us for our upcoming CCA events. Follow us online on social media and on our website. Anthony, thank you again for your time and for your expertise here. And thanks everyone for tuning in.
Thanks, Michael. Appreciate it.